This is the home buyer's roadmap, first time home buyer system. It's different. I know, Paula, you don't know who I am. I'm pretty well known in the industry. I've been doing this right about 34 years now. So you're in good hands. You're going to learn some cool stuff. All right. And I talk about three things that about buying a house that nobody else ever talks about. And I have done 1,000 of these seminars over the years. I've been to 1,000 of these seminars over the years, and this is going to be very, very different. And you're going to see. First of all, I teach why it's good for you. Now, to some people, it's obvious. To some people, it's not. But I do like to cover it. And I also share that the numbers don't lie. Okay. I'm a numbers guy, and these numbers will, that's the shocking part, I believe. Okay. And another thing we do is we bridge the gap between the cost of home ownership and the rent price. And we say, where do we get that money? And I give some great ideas that will help you cover that cost. So I think you're going to find that all interesting.
At any time during this video, you can reach out to me by text or phone or email. Just please respect, of course, business hours. If you're watching this video at 4 o'clock in the morning, I might not be awake, and I am Pacific time. But you could also email me at chris@fireyourlandlord.info.
All right. Now, here's one of the exciting things. We give up to a $10,000 credit. It's basically 1% of the loan amount. So if you buy a house and get a $500,000 loan, you're going to get a $5,000 credit. You get an $800,000 loan, you get an $8,000 credit towards closing costs. So that's a big deal. Okay. That is by the way, is a direct reduction of my commission. I don't raise the rate to do it. I reduce my commission to give you that. So I think that's pretty phenomenal because nobody does that. Okay. So I like to teach people why I do what I do. What's my why? And people get a kick out of it. I make you laugh with it. But it's all started a long, long time ago. That handsome guy with the hat, yes, that is me. And a long, long time ago. And I remember the stories. I was too young to remember it happening, but I remember the stories of my dad telling my mom, we're going to buy a house. And my mom said, why do we got to buy a house? Nobody in our family ever owned a house. And my dad, that old Marine, said, we're buying a house. Oh, okay. And he bought the house, and he understood some things that we of course didn't understand. But here's what happened. As soon as he bought that house, his older brother says, if my younger brother could buy a house, I could buy a house. And he did. And my mother's sister said, if my sister can buy a house, we could buy a house. And pretty soon every one of the siblings, they felt like he was the first one to topple that domino to say, we have to do this. And he bought the house, and everybody in the family did. So that was a big thing. A lot of generations, they don't do that. Now, there's my why right there. 3 daughters, husbands, 16 grandkids. That's my why. But I use my house. It becomes basically the foundation. My house is the rock. It's where all the traditions are created for all these kids and all those types of things. Now, I don't know if you have children, but this is why people need to own a home. If they have kids, the average score is 7 points higher in English and 9 points higher in math because their parents are homeowners. We don't know why this happens, but it happens. 50% more likely to graduate from high school, 125% more likely to graduate from college. And we all just want what's best for our kids. So, right there with, hey, your why, it makes sense. Now, look, I create tradition in my house. I'm Italian. I do all the pizza things. And everything is tradition, and it all starts in my home. And for a lot of people, they don't think about it, but boy, you could change a lot of people's lives like that. Now, here's another reason. Children of homeowners are 3 times more likely to own their own home than children of renters. See, when parents, and by the way, anything you see here, you can Google it, you can chat GPT it, be my guest. Okay. This is how it basically works. But we want our kids to be able to buy homes too. So if we do that, they're 3 times more likely to do it themselves. And look at this. My father did it for us. He was the first one for to topple that domino. Everyone and myself, my siblings, All my cousins, every one of us bought a house because he was the first one. My father did it for us. I did it for them. And see that little handsome guy right there? That's my great grandson. His father is doing it for him. So, I think it's good for people to want to do this for their own family. And maybe you're the person, maybe you've owned 10 houses. I don't know that maybe this is the first time and you're just learning about it. But maybe you're the person who's going to do it for your own family. And that's my why. I think it's important. That's why I share that. So the first reason to buy a home, because it's better for your family. And I'm a big believer in that. Now, number two, the numbers don't lie. The numbers absolutely don't lie. And I'm going to teach you some amazing things about numbers. The average homeowner retires with 40 times the wealth of the average renter. 40 times. That's incredible. And people say, how does that happen? It's going to be very obvious how that happens as we go forward. The average renter doesn't understand they will pay over $2 million in rent. Now, people say no, and they take their rent and they just multiply by however many years. It's not like that. We have to think about other things. But let's look long term. In order to win financially, you got to think long term. So let's look at the numbers, and it's going to start to become apparent. First of all, everybody says, Chris, renting is cheaper, the monthly payment. But we have to think about inflation if we're going to think long term. So I share simple examples. Look at this, and maybe you relate to this. 30 years ago, a hamburger was between 89 cents and $1.50. Today, it's $4 to $6. It's gone up 4 times the amount just with inflation. And people get used to it over time because it seems to be slow. A movie ticket, popcorn, and a drink was a little over $8. Today, it's over $25 to go to a movie. And here's another one that blows people's mind. 1995, the average new car was about $15,000. Today, it's almost $49,000. Not for a Mercedes, for an average car. The numbers just go up. Now, it just makes sense. The same thing would happen with rent. Now, here's a perfect example. In the Los Angeles County, for an apartment rental, 30 years ago, it was $746. Today, it's $26.25. It's about 3.5 times the amount going forward. I'm in the Inland Empire. Here's a house in LA, 1124. It's almost 4 times the price. It's $4,300 to rent a house in Los Angeles. And this doesn't stop. It's just going to continue going. The Inland Empire, it was $650 to rent 30 years ago, and today it's $2,800. That's just average. Again, you can Google it. This is Chat GPT. It's all there. And these numbers, in order to understand where it's going, you have to understand the inflation. Rent inflation has been 4.8%. So somebody spending $2,500 a month. In 5 years, they're going to be spending over $3,160. And it doesn't stop there. And I show how to calculate those numbers, just multiplied by 1.048 and continue to compound. And that's how we get those numbers. Look what happens in 10 years. It's almost $3,800. And it gets worse. 20 years, it's over $6,000. So people aren't preparing. They're not thinking long term. And people say, oh, that's 20 years up the road. Let me show you how fast 20 years went. See that? Me holding that little guy, that's my grandson on the left. He's getting married. You see the picture on the right, me making pizza. I always did this with the kids. That little guy on the right, he's the one who's a dad now. That's how fast 20 years went by. And the next 20, you're just going to think back 20 years. How fast did it go? You blink and it's gone. And it's going to do the same thing going forward. And by year 30, $9,600 a month in rent. And people say, how is that possible? How could that happen? Well, you're going to get increases in income more than likely, but you're still spending that kind of money. I mean, it's just crazy. It should have your mind racing saying, am I throwing this money away? Because it's just a lot of money. So look at it this way. That person at $2,500 with that rate of inflation in 30 years will spend $1.947 million on rent. And you know what happens When you rent, you have a big goose egg at the end of 30 years. You have nothing after almost $2 million. So I like to teach people these things. I think for me, it was mind blowing. I throw these silly graphics in there. I apologize. But it's mind blowing to understand. But I say, now let's look at buying a house. We got to compare a $600,000 house in the Inland Empire. Basically, if somebody puts 5% down, that's $30,000. You don't need 20% down. We have other programs that I'll teach you about, which are even less. There's all kinds of different programs. And I'm using 5.75% interest. The rate's a little bit higher than that right now, but you will be refinancing over time. Whoever buys will be refinancing it to lower rates. Principal and interest payment would be $31.64. And then we got to add everything. Property taxes and homeowners insurance is about $39.64. Now, I'm not including mortgage insurance because there are ways to buy it out. And especially if you have good credit, and you will be refinancing. You're not going to be paying this the whole time, the mortgage insurance. It's just for a period of time. So for the purposes of this, I'm just using that number of $39.64. Now, look what happens. Over 30 years, you would have spent $500,000 less on a mortgage than you would on rent. And right around year 17 or so, you would actually have spent less on the mortgage than on rent, okay, going forward. And it just continues to go this way. Oh, one more thing, that $500,000 you saved, that obviously is a big deal by buying a home. And I didn't even add in what you now have, because you got a goose egg by renting, but now you have a home. So these things, I think, are mind blowing. I think they're great. And I'm going to show you a bunch of things about becoming wealthy. If we use that $600,000 home over the last 20 years, homes have appreciated about 4 to 6%. Now, for the purposes of this example, I'm using the low number of only 4%. And if we use a 4% rate of increase in the value of that home for the rest of this example, I'm only using 4%, watch what happens. There's a couple of things. First of all, the renting, is it cheaper than buying? Because you got to think about, you're paying down the principal. And there's two ways to make money. Value goes up, but you're also paying down the principal. You're buying the biggest asset of your life. So before we get into all that, let's see if we can find you some money to buy a home, because I think that's a big deal. I think that's really important to find the money because it appears more expensive. So we call it bridging the gap between renting and owning. So let's take a look. Okay, first of all, if with this exact example, the new homeowner would be spending about $590 a month in principal to buy the biggest asset of their life. And every year, next month it might be $592, the next month $594. You understand how that works. You pay a little bit more towards principal all the time. So you're using $590 to buy the biggest principal, the biggest asset of your life. And it's kind of like putting $590 a month into your own 401k. So I tell people, look, if you're doing what you should be doing and putting money in a 401k, maybe you can back off just a year or two, a couple of years, and you'll have that extra $590 right there to put it towards buying the home. Here's another area, a tax refund. The average tax refund, your numbers will be different, higher or lower, but the average tax refund is about $3,600 a year. That's $300 a month. Now, a tax refund is only an overpayment of your taxes to the IRS refunded back to you. So if you have a job, all you have to do is go into HR, you raise your exemptions up until you get an extra $300 a month in your paycheck. Totally legal. Teach people to do it. I always say, look, consult a tax professional if anything major has changed in your life. And let's see what happens. Now we're down to about $3,074. We're only like $574 away, if that's you with the 401k and the $3,600 tax refund. But here's something people don't think about. In this exact example, it would have a tax deduction of about $40,000. That means a family making $100,000, they only pay taxes on $60,000. That's going to save them at least $500 more a month. So they can go back into HR and raise the exemptions up again. Same type of thing. Okay. So that's about 600 bucks a month. Consult a tax professional. But now you bridge the gap. You have the money. Okay. It's just changing the way people do things and they can afford it. So look at that. It's actually $24, $26 less. Now, there's other areas. I ask people, will you and your significant other get a raise next year? Okay. And most people say, yeah, we'll get a raise. I'll get a raise. He'll get a raise. She'll get a raise, whatever it is. How about the next year? Well, yeah, we get and everybody has a different number. Some people tell me we're going to get a 12% increase. Some people say we're going to get $1 an hour, whatever it is. Okay. The year after that. See, I remember my dad buying the house I grew up in. And I remember him saying, and that was not the first house. I remember him saying, $272 a month. How am I going to make these payments? And we could laugh about it, but he only made $6,000 a year. But the next year he got a little raise, just like I'm showing you here. Next year he got another little raise. Next year he got a little promotion. He didn't notice it in a couple of years. So if a couple both get $1 an hour raise, that's $346 more a month in income next year. 2 years, 792. 3 years is over $1,000 a month. So people sometimes they just bite the bullet and they don't go out and spend lavishly on things for a year or two or three until they get used to it, until maybe their income bumps up a little bit. The entertainment becomes their home. So these are things that people just don't think about, but it makes buying a house way more affordable. Now, this one, I get everybody. The average family spends over $500 a month eating outside the home, and 1,000. I see people's bank statements because of the loans. $1,000 a month is so common, and I see husband spends 15 bucks on lunch, wife spends 15 bucks. I mean, that's kind of what it costs today, and that's 600 bucks a month before once a week or every 2 weeks going to Applebee's. It's $1,000 a month is very, very common, and if you brown bag it for a while, you'd probably be healthier and you save that money and own a house. So here's another area that I give people Starbucks. Everybody laughs when I show this. But $5 for a cup of coffee every day, and the average bill is over $8. Hey, that's it's over $100 a month. Buy the house. McDonald's makes a better cup of coffee for a buck. And I always say, look, what do you really want more? When you really think about it, do you want that Big Mac? Or do you want your own house? Do you want that sweater or that book? Or do you want changing spending habits and changing saving habits and changing income tax stuff on your W-9, for your job? That right there could put you in a place to afford a house. And I don't know your situation, but that's I share that. And just by changing a few habits that most of us have, right there can enable you to be able to afford a home. The lessons, they just bring you much closer than most people think about buying a house. Now, here's something that gets a lot of people, because a lot of people are on the fence. Like, should I buy a house now or should I wait for rates to drop? And it's it's a very common thing for people to say. But let's use this $600,000 example. With a 4% increase, okay, in price, 1 year it's $624,000, just waiting 1 year. Wait 2 years and it becomes basically $649,000. So you waited 2 years for waiting for rates to come down. And I can't tell you how many millions of people have been doing this, and I've heard from thousands of them in the last couple of years. But obviously you enjoy the appreciation if you're doing it. Now, let's take a look at this. By the way, this Riverside home was $585,000 now, but in 2023 it was $523,000. Last year it was 562. Now it's 585. Same house. I mean, this is very common how things work. Nice home. So it's what do we got? We got $62,000. But remember, you paid about $12,000 down in principal, plus the appreciation. You owe $62,000 less than if you waited 2 more years, and you gain $74,000 only waiting 2 years. By buying now instead of waiting 2 years. 2 years later, you have 74 grand in equity. So people don't really think about it like this, but I encourage it. So I say this, it's pretty obvious. Does it make sense to wait for interest rates to go down to save a couple of $100 a month? You would have lost $74,000. And untold millions of families across America have done exactly that. They've waited for the rates to go down. So we teach a different concept. Okay. I want people to really understand this concept. And in the mortgage and real estate industry, we understand that we say marry the house and date the rate, because you're going to refi anyway when the rates go down. So get in on the lower price. Now, if you wait till the interest rates go down, guess what happens? And we do think that will go down. Guess what happens? The price of the house is going to go up. You're going to pay even more. Rates come down, houses are going to soar in price even more than they are now. So that's why it's like, get in now. Okay. It just makes more sense not to procrastinate. Now, we saw how inflation could, work against you when it comes to rent, but it can also work for you. And working for you is the key. Look at this. In 5 years, this is the exact example I use. 5 years, you would have paid down $45,000 in principal. Remember, you make money two ways. One is the value going up. The other one is the principal going down. 4% appreciation, $129,000 in value. Altogether, $174,000 that you earned basically by buying in just 5 years. But if you rent, you don't get that. In 10 years, it's $394,000. Look at that. In 20 years, it's 990 grand. And when I say 990 grand, hopefully you've restarted the 401k. Congratulations, you're a millionaire because you bought the house. And you can obviously see why right here, almost $2 million, why people wind up with 40 times the wealth, simply because they bought a house. So that's a big deal. Now, let's take a look. If we use that example, this is what blows people's mind. If we use that example of $2,500 a month, just for 1 year, first year, because they say it's cheaper to buy, right? $30,000 you spent in rent. That mortgage costs $47,000. So it looks like it's $17,000 a year more expensive to buy. But, oh, wait a minute. $17,000, but is it really cheaper? Let's see what happens. Well, what we just did was we paid off $7,200 of the principal. So now it's about $10,000 cheaper to rent, right? But what happened? We forgot something else. Okay, we're looking at $10,290. Here's what we forgot. We forgot that the house went up in value $24,000 at 4%. So that cheaper rent cost an extra $13,710. Is it just in 1 year? So it is not cheaper to rent. It is cheaper to buy a house. Figure out how to bite the bullet. Look, I'm an expert at helping families figure this out. Sometimes they're ready day one. Sometimes they need a cosigner. There's all kinds of different things, but we figure out how to make this happen. Just the first year, they're $13,000 ahead. So it obviously looks cheaper, but it's not, Paula. Now, here's a perfect example. It's a spreadsheet. I throw up numbers all over. Let me just show you how this works. Look at this. In 5 years, you'd have paid principal down $43,000. It would have appreciated $129,000. You have now $172,000, and your payment was lower by $72,000 by paying the cheaper rent, but it cost you $100 grand because you didn't get that appreciation. So it's never really cheaper. So, and over 30 years, you spent an extra $500,000 on the rent, and you'd have a house here worth $1.9 million. You saved $500,000. You have $2.5 million basically because you bought the house in 30 years. I mean, nobody teaches these type of numbers. I hope that's like, wow, I didn't see it that way. That's how most people tell me that they see it. So I like to give people things to think about. I'm getting a little silly with those graphics, but which is better, obviously? 0 at the end of 30 years or $1.9 million? it's already obvious, and so I don't have to do that. You spend $500,000 less to gain all that equity. So what happens after 30 years, by the way, when you're renting? Year 31, the rent is now $10,185 a month. It's over 10 grand a month, and you have nothing. So the homeowner gets to retire and only has to pay the tax and the insurance. So I think the homeowner is way ahead. So I hope you're understanding that this is tremendous. And by the way, in the comments, there's a link for a calendar, which you can click on there, and you just make an appointment to meet with me, whether it's, again, by phone or Zoom or in person, if you're local. So we all know renting is not cheaper than buying. It's not even close. So what we do is I teach people, how do you qualify? Those are the magic things. That's probably what you came more to see today. How do I qualify? And there's different loans that have different requirements. So I put it like this. I make it very, very easy. Okay. Credit, because people ask the two biggest things: what's the down payment? What's the credit? And on an FHA loan, 580 FICO score, 3.5% down payment. A conventional loan could be as low as 3%, but the interest rate's higher. And basically 620 FICO score. A VA loan, if you're a veteran or your spouse is a veteran, hey, 0 down, 550. FHA, DPA, that's a down payment assistance. Okay, they usually have a little bit higher credit requirements and whatnot. They're not too bad, but they do. And on the bankruptcies and foreclosures, bad things happen to good people. That tells you kind of the time frame. Now, there are a couple of other options that people aren't aware of. If your FICO score is between 500 and 579, you can still buy a house with an FHA loan, but it's 10% down, not 3.5%. But here's the truth: it's usually pretty easy if somebody's below 580 to bump their score up, to teach them a couple of things so that they can do the 3.5%. Conventional, there's no options below 620. A VA loan, 500 to 549, still 0%, but the truth is, very rarely gets approved. So again, I take them, I help them raise their score. And a down payment assistance, still 0%. Well, you can do 0%, but the rate is higher. Okay, I teach people the rate is always higher on those programs. It's, if you have your own money, you're always better off, and I could always teach that. So here's the type of down payment assistance if you need it. There are grants and there are loans. They're a little harder to qualify for. You got to have more income because the interest rates are higher. You don't have to be a first-time home buyer in most of these programs. Okay, but again, the rates are higher. I tell people, I make people laugh when I tell them this story. I say, when your kid was 6, 7 years old and they lost a tooth, what do? You tell them, put the tooth underneath the pillow, and the morning the tooth fairy comes, and he finds $1 or $5 or whatever it is today, and they find all this money. And a lot of renters think, oh, first time home buyer, down payment assistance. They think if they put their rent check under the pillow, the first time home buyer fairy is going to like sprinkle money all over. It doesn't really work that way. It works with a higher interest rate. That's where that money really comes from. Okay, so if you have the option to do it on your own money, do it on your own money. If you can't, you can't. Okay, I'd rather see somebody buy a house than not buy a house because of that. We'll always refinance you later into a lower rated program. There are grants. Grants usually never have to be paid back. That's the good part. They have considerable higher fees as well as interest rates. And they're usually tied to FHA loans also. And let's see, some of them even cover closing costs. Like we have one that, the one I do the most, they'll give you 3.5% for as a loan, for as a second mortgage, and that covers the entire down payment, but we still have closing costs. Now, sometimes the agent can get the seller to pay some, and there are a few different options, but sometimes they need more. So we have an extra program where it's 1.5%. So a $600,000 house, they'd get the entire down payment, and they get $9,000 towards closing costs. The interest rate's higher. There's nothing I can do about that. And as soon as possible, we refinance into the lower rate program. That's the whole idea. Now, let's see. People ask about job requirements. Almost all programs in the United States have the same thing, a 2-year work history. There is an exception if you went to college. Okay, they use that in lieu of experience. That's fine. Sometimes a specialized certificate program. I'm working on one right now. He only has 1 year experience, but he went to school for a year to become an electrician. Great, that's 2 years. They accept that. That's fine. And it does not have to be 2 years on the same job, because I do hear that all the time. Okay, not true. Income. If you have a job, the key is the history. We use the gross pay because a lot of times people say, "Oh, I net." No, it's not take home. It's before the take home, because that can be adjusted. Overtime, we use a history of usually 2 years. We average it. Commission, same thing. Part-time income, you can use that as long as you have a history. We're going to average it. A second job. I have a lot of people who work 2 jobs. They have to work consecutively 2 years on the 2 jobs, and we do that, and we get to use the income from both. A bonus, 2 years income. And for self-employed income, it's based on the profit on the income tax. It's not based on your gross. I've had people gross $1 million and net $10,000, so they save money on taxes, but obviously you can't buy chewing gum as far as a house with $10,000 a year in income. Down payment sources. Besides the down payment assistance, obviously your checking account, savings, gifts, 401ks. People don't think about that. I'm going to teach you some cool things about the 401k, an IRA, retirement funds, gifts from grandma. I wish I had a grandma who would give me money to buy a house, but some people do have that. Now, those are acceptable. Here's what's unacceptable. Borrowed money. You can't use borrowed money for a down payment. If you're borrowing the money, I literally, as a licensed loan officer, have to stick my fingers in my ear and go, la, la, la. I'm not allowed to hear that. Not allowed to borrow money for it. So it can't be like on a credit card that you got a cash advance last month. Okay. We have to see it in the bank for at least a couple of months. Cash. Some people have cash in the mattress. Okay. There's no way to verify it was received in a legal manner. And I jokingly tell people, the government doesn't know if it came from Al Qaeda or El Chapo. They have no idea where that money came from. So if you got cash, talk to us. We'll figure out how to get it there, but don't just put it in the bank. Okay. Something else to consider if you have a 401k. If you had a 401k and you use $40,000 to buy a house, $30,000 for down payment, $10,000 for closing costs, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't want to take money out of my 401k." I understand. Remember that $13,710 less than rent that you would have lost had you continued to rent? That averages out to a 34% rate of return in the first year. So it's not so bad to take the money out of the 401k. Over 3 years, with the appreciation and everything else, it's over a 30% rate of return. So a 401k, it's not the end of the world if you take the money out. Okay. Once you get started again, hey, put the money back in. But again, people don't look at numbers like that, and that's real. Now, if you're self-employed, we have alternative documentation programs. For most programs, you need to prove your income and assets, but others have a much larger down payment and as well as higher interest rates. But we could work off 12 months bank statements to see how much money is coming in, depending on your situation. I don't know if that applies to you or not. These clients are better served rather than in a webinar like this. They're better served in a one-on-one meeting, based on the individual circumstance for sure. And again, I remind people the link is in the comments if you want to make an appointment. And then you have to be pre-approved to buy a house. So why be pre-approved? It's important what it is. First of all, you can't make an offer on a house without a pre-approval. Your offer automatically is not going to be accepted. They want to see a letter. They want to see some usually computerized reports showing that you're approved. So an agent, they can't even show you a home since your offer is not going to be accepted. And the one thing I've been doing this for 34 years that I've seen many, many times is when I tell somebody, okay, you're approved for $600,000 and they want to see the house at $700,000. It's not going to work. So unless they get a cosigner or do something different, and it actually leads to heartache for people. All of a sudden they saw the crystal chandeliers and they want the pool and this and that, but they can't afford that. It makes sense to know where you're headed, what you qualify for. And from there, here's what we do. We start by making an appointment, and basically we just over the phone, I could pretty much tell if you're close or yes, you can do it, or definitely can't do it. Okay. We fill out an application, takes 5 minutes. I'm going to ask all kinds of information. You can fill it out. I can even send you a link. You can fill it out yourself, or we can fill it out together over the phone. It's no big deal. And from there, we're going to ask for proof of income, pay stubs, W-2s, assets. I run the credit report, these type of things. It's very common today to have husband, wife, and brother and sister-in-law on one loan, or friends or cousins or different, it's very common. So we could put 4 or 5 people on a loan if necessary. Sometimes we do that. Sometimes they buy a 2-unit property. One family lives in one lives in the other. Next, we enter everything in a computer in exacts. Nothing is guessing, nothing is approximate, everything is exact. And we get a computerized approval. And from there, we supply the real estate agent with a pre-approval letter so that you can actually make offers on houses. You go see houses and whatnot. And now you would consult with your agent and do the fun part, go see houses. But the agent has to know, it's important again, what you must have. Okay. Oh, I got kids. I need to be in this school district. Or, hey, I got little ones. I really want to be on a cul-de-sac. Little things like that. What would be nice to have? A pool might be nice to have, might not be a requirement. So it's different for every family. What your price range is, obviously, your desired location. You may say, I'm not living over there. Well, I'll take this area. So it's good to have that kind of good consultation. What your schedule is, because they work crazy hours, hey, I can only see them on Sundays, or I can only see them Friday afternoons, whatever it is. How soon you want to fire your landlord, buy your own house, obviously how many bedrooms and bathrooms you want or need. So a great consultation. It's important to be on the same page with the realtor. I think it's great. And you're going to visit a number of houses, and you're going to find 1 or 2 or 3. You might find, hey, these, I'm willing to make offers on 2 or 3 of these to hopefully get one of those offers accepted for you. I always tell people, follow your agent's lead. I only work with professional agents. I've been doing this so long. Follow your agent's lead and make offers. Now, you got to consider a couple of things. There are usually other people making an offer too. So I've had people over the years, I'm offering on a $600,000 house. Let's offer 510 and see what happens. It's not going to happen, not in today's market, obviously. Okay. But the highest bid usually wins, but not always. The strongest often wins. And what is the strongest offer? Well, it could have an 800 credit score. It could have a very low debt ratio. It could have a big down payment. So the real estate agent is going to recommend to the seller, hey, this one's going to close. Okay, this one they feel good about. And sometimes it's not the highest offer, but it's the most solid offer. Okay, so that's something to consider too. Follow your agent's lead. That's what they do for a living. They're pros at that. I personally make your offer stand out. What I do is, I've been doing this so long, I call the listing agent to build their confidence in the offer. I use my notoriety. Hey, this is Chris Trapani, the mortgage pro. Do you know who I am? Most of them know who I am, the Fire Your Landlord brand and all that. They know me. And I say, I got a slam dunk deal ready to go. I'm going to build their confidence for them to say, this one's going to close, to hopefully bring it up to the top. So we do that. Now, we do that. You got an offer accepted. Congratulations. That's fantastic. You're on your way to becoming a homeowner. And you got to do one more thing. You got to make a phone call, and you got to fire your landlord. That's kind of fun. In fact, if you do it in person and you record it, yeah, I'm going to send you a special present, and you're going to be a Facebook star when I'm done with you. Okay. Now let's recap real simple. The numbers don't lie. They can actually work. Inflation can work for you, not just against you. No one ever has to be more than 3 years away from buying a house if they decide to. And when I say 3 years away, what I mean by that basically is this. If you've had a foreclosure, 3 years later, FHA loan, you could still buy a house. Nobody's ever more than 3 years away. Okay. It's not cheaper to rent. I mean, I think I've proven that. The numbers don't lie. It is not cheaper to rent. And there's a closing cost credit up to $10,000, basically 1% of the loan amount, uh, available to you. If you take a $200,000 loan, you get 2,000, and 900,000, you get 9,000. It's very simple. Now, in the beginning, we mentioned there were three things about buying a home no one talks about because it's great for your family. They don't, you got to understand the emotions that get involved. You probably had grandparents or parents or somebody where your foundation was set and the traditions were set and the holidays and all the different things like I did for my grandkid. Your house will do that for your family. That it just happens that way. The numbers don't lie. And hopefully we found the money, if there is a gap, to bridge that gap to help you do that. So there it is. We have a course also, things you can continue to learn. I literally wrote the book, How to Fire Your Landlord and Buy Your Own House. I could send you a book for free. Okay. And we go through everything. I hold your hand through the entire process. And you can click the link. The goal is stop guessing and start knowing, because so many people are just guessing. And that's really, really the truth of what they do.
I can help you in many states. And if I can't help you, I can always refer you to a pro. I know the pros in the industry. So you can reach out. I will do my best to help you get the uh, Fire Your Landlord credit. I'll try and negotiate that on your behalf to help you out. And also, please share, like, and obviously, let's fire your landlord.